Everyone, and welcome back. This is Professor Hall, and today we are talking about The Age of Innocence by Edith Wharton. This is the first lecture in our series about the book, and I'm going to be giving you a brief summary. And then in our other lectures, we'll be talking about some of the literary elements of the novel and the historical background. So before I start, this picture right here is a painting of a young girl entitled The Age of Innocence. And a lot of people believe that the painting, or at least the painting's title, inspired Wharton in the title of her book. So that possibly she named the book kind of after the painting. There's not a lot to substantiate this, but I think it's kind of interesting, and I think that the painting fits some of the themes. So let's get started with our summary. High Society. The book was published in 1920. However, most of the book is set in the 1870s. There's a scene at the end that picks up about 26 years after the main action. But outside of that chapter, everything's happening in the 1870s over the course of a couple of years. So we begin with a description of a night at the opera attended by New York City's elites. One of these elites is Newland Archer, a young gentleman lawyer and the son of one of the most illustrious families in New York. Now, that term gentleman lawyer basically means that he is a lawyer by profession, but his family has enough money that he doesn't really need to be a lawyer. Most of his money is not coming from his job. It's coming from his family money and his inheritance. So we also have the beautiful, innocent socialite May Welland, and she has just agreed to marry Archer that afternoon. She tells him that she cares, and he's excited about announcing their engagement, but then their engagement is in peril when May's 30-year-old cousin Ellen returns to New York. Opera goers are much more interested in gossiping about Ellen than they are in watching the opera singer. And you have these scenes where a lot of people are looking at them and talking about them. And Archer becomes worried because he and May really have done everything correctly in terms of what their families expect and what society expects. So he doesn't want anything to go wrong. Any hint of a scandal could make his family, urge him to call off this engagement. And he doesn't want that to happen. So over here I have a picture of an opera house from around that time, just so you can kind of get a good idea of what that would look like. So the Olenska. This is Ellen's official title. She's married to a Polish count. This picture is Michelle Pfeiffer in the 1990s version of the film. You can see that they have her in red to kind of stand out and to show that something is sort of different about her. So the Countess Ellen Olenska is separating from her husband, and it's not entirely clear what happened. The fact that he cheated on her and that he's a philanderer is clear, but whether he abused her, whether he's stolen her money, we're given little bits of these accusations from Ellen herself, kind of hinting at things here and there. A lot of what we find out comes from gossip, so it's not objective. We don't objectively know exactly what happened in her marriage. But for whatever reason, she's come to America and she's left him in Europe. Unlike the sheltered, innocent May, her cousin, Ellen is carefree and bohemian. Bohemia refers to a certain part of Europe, and at that time that's a word that would kind of mean free and not so uptight and puritanical as the Americans, and involve things like travel and some culture and those types of things. So a lot different than the New York society, which has quite a number of rules that people have to follow. Ellen wears sort of what they consider inappropriate clothes. The amount of cleavage she's showing here, for example, She's a favorite with the young men, and that's a comment that someone makes about her a number of times that shows that she might not have been faithful to her husband as well. The family's matriarch, Mrs. Manson Mingott, sometimes is called Granny, and she wishes to reintroduce Ellen to good society. Therefore, her cousin May feels sort of obligated to help her. And Archer, sometimes called Newland, that's his full name, but Archer is really eager for the wedding to go forward. He also remembers Ellen from his childhood. They used to play together. And so he agrees to help kind of defend her behavior to help her become accepted by Old New York. So we have a number of scenes where he's talking with people to convince them to invite her to parties or to have her allowed to be coming to call, things of that nature. But then there's a change of plans. Ellen's family is worried about the scandal and disgrace when Ellen announces her plans to divorce her husband. So it's one thing to live in a different country and be separated, especially if you're traveling to visit family, right? But it's a whole other thing to be divorced and to bring sort of shame and scandal upon the family in that way. So Archer's law practice becomes involved with these proceedings, and his law partners basically say to him, look, we know the situation that you're in, and we would like you to convince her to drop the idea of divorce. It'll be better for everybody involved. So he talks to her, but as he talks, he starts to feel attraction toward her. This is kind of hinted at in earlier chapters, but it's really apparent when they finally have some time alone to talk. Worried about his feelings, he rushes to May, and he asks her to move up the engagement and marry him sooner than planned. And that's what we're seeing in this scene right here from the black and white version of the film, the black and white film version of the book that was done in the 1930s. May asks him if there's someone else, and she talks a little bit about the fact that Archer once had an affair with a married woman a few years before. This is something that he did not think she knew about, and he dropped the attachment with the married woman once May sort of started to show interest in him. He says, no, that's all done. That's in the past. There's no one else. I just love you so much. And we'll talk about his motivations for doing this a little bit later. The heart was there before the people. So Newland and May do indeed hasten or speed up their wedding, despite his growing feelings for Ellen. They honeymoon and they settle in New York, which is exactly what they are expected to do. Newland realizes how little they have in common, and he starts to feel kind of stifled by this society, but at the same time, he's comfortable. His image of Ellen is fading. He doesn't seem to have much passion for his wife, but he thinks, like, this is how things are supposed to be. Sowing your wild oats is acceptable before marriage. It's okay to run around and have fun, but after marriage, if you do anything like that, no one will talk to you. You can be cut off from your family, and you'll have no money. So really, his finances are completely in jeopardy if he were to leave his wife. But when he's reunited with Ellen, his passions are renewed. He learns that her husband has cut her off financially and wishes to have her return to Europe to be with him. So the Count is sending different emissaries asking her to come home. And when Ellen refuses, her family threatens to cut her off financially as well. So you can kind of see how money and marriage are really tied quite closely together. I forgot I put this in. We're just friends. No, of course I won't end the friendship to save my marriage, but we're just friends. That's a little bit of what's going on. Through a series of meetings and partings, Newland and Ellen fall in love, or possibly in lust. We'll talk more about that later. But essentially, they have an emotional affair. Newland sees in Ellen an escape from those stifling rules of the New York aristocracy. He likes the fact that she's bohemian, and with her he hopes to find some kind of freedom he didn't even really know he wanted before. In May, Newland kind of sees a woman who's innocent but also ignorant. She's the perfect model of everything that old New York wanted her to be. She can never surprise him, and she's conventional, but in all the wrong ways. So he's pulled between this romantic, possibly fantasy of an affair with Ellen, and the safe, conventional, but real life with his wife. And that's all I'm going to say. I don't want to give too much away. I just wanted to set up for you guys what's going on to begin with and how the action gets started. But what happens to them, if he stays, if he leaves, you'll have to find that out yourself. So, read-alikes. If you enjoy this book, The House of Mirth by Edith Wharton has some of the same themes. It's also set in what's called the Gilded Age of New York. So Edith Wharton wrote a number of books that take place during this period of time. It's a great book as well. The Great Gatsby, I know a lot of people read in high school. If you pretended to, and you can always go back and give it another shot. Some of the same ideas of having an affair, of the money and love kind of being tangled up together. Dominic Dunne is this is a little bit more recent book. The Two Mrs. Grenvilles. It's quite interesting. Dominic Dunne himself was part of this elite crowd, and he sort of wrote a number of books about people with money getting away with crimes. But The Two Mrs. Grenvilles is really about this woman who marries into money, and then how her mother-in-law, the first Mrs. Grenville, helps or does not help her to fit into society. It's a really interesting book, but quite a fun read. Gone with the Wind, another book about people who are having an emotional affair. A lot of people think that Scarlett in Gone with the Wind is the hero, and that she's kind of, I think, here comparable to Ellen Olenska, but a lot of people who haven't read the book, Melanie, the character of Melanie, is a lot like the character of May in The Age of Innocence, and she's really the heroine of Gone with the Wind. So if you're interested in that kind of dynamic of two women disliking and then supporting each other, it's quite a good read. Bridges of Madison County, again, a book about two people having an affair and sort of being torn emotionally between doing what's right and doing what feels good. Anna Karenina, you'll see a pattern here if you know anything about this book. Again, a book about having an affair. Anna Karenina sees a number of different couples and looks at what makes a good marriage and what doesn't, and why people have affairs and what happens to them when they give in to those passions. Howard's End, another great novel about relationships and marriage. And then The Lux is interesting. It's a young adult series, but it takes place among the New York elites as well, kind of in this same time period. So a lot of different books here, kind of with the same themes, but all very different genres. Some young adult, historical fiction, crime novel, all of that. So if you like this book, I hope that you'll like some of these as well. And that is it for this presentation. Next time, we're going to be talking about the author and the literary movements in which she is working. So we'll talk about how the book fits into various literary movements and how her personal experiences and life kind of shaped this book. Thanks.